All right, we are live. So, welcome everybody. I am just
Hello.
going to check to see if I know it's like a 20-second lag on YouTube, and I don't even have Facebook pulled up. But yeah, we are live. So, good. All right. So, welcome to our second discussion of Bad Fat Black Girl by Sesali Bowen. If you don't have the syllabus, I don't know how you're going to get it. Go to the website and hopefully you can navigate it. I know there was a email that went out to insiders, but you can also purchase it from the website. It is on sale this period of time for $4.99. So grab your syllabus and we're going to run through it. So I am Dr. Donnesha.
And I'm Kaylin.
All right. So what do you want to do? Do you want to hop in and
Yeah.
start with what do you want to start with?
Okay, let's see. Oh, um, just so you all know, we have a GoFundMe right now. We are trying to raise money to sustain Smart Brown Girl. We're officially a nonprofit. Last time the link was at the bottom of the
Yeah,
page.
I don't know where she put the link. So or where it is in the overlay. So
But if you go on our Twitter, Smart Brown Girl, or if you go on our website, it is on the main page and you can
yeah.
donate or you can share with people so they can donate. So we can continue to create syllabi and have author talks and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So we kind of hopped around last time, just kind of going with the flow of things. And I'm surprised we don't have any people popping in right now. But I would love to start with the first question for chapter 4, which is what are your earliest experiences with hypersexualization?
Oh, this was on chapter 5.
Chapter
Right?
5. My wait,
Okay.
oops, I skipped. Hold on, let me go back.
Do we want to start with chapter 4?
Yes, I am so sorry. Okay, so so the first question in chapter 4 is how did your relationship and understanding of money during your childhood impact your relationship with it into your adulthood?
Hmm. This was like a really hard chapter to read or listen to because I did listen to it on the audio version and it's very good. Because it does remind me a lot of my relationship with my mom. And I think we have a good relationship. Like we never had the same kind of issues I think that Cecily and her mother had where money was a contentious issue. But I do remember that like oftentimes my mom had to borrow money from me, especially when I was in college and I had extra money in my account. And she had to, transfer money over to hold out for a bill or something like that. And so I think I always grew up kind of understanding our financial situation so I'm the only daughter, and I think sometimes
Mhm.
parents will put a lot on their own, either their oldest or their only daughters, to really know more about the finances or their situations. And I mean, it was fine, but sometimes I do think about it and I'm like, dang, my innocence was gone so early, knowing
Yeah.
the ins and outs of how my parents' finances were. And even to talk about it openly, it's like, ooh, I hope my mama don't see this or anybody she know,
Yeah.
because it's just such a thing in Black communities is often really secretive and something that we don't discuss. If we are discussing money beyond with each other, is not really in depth. So I never really knew how financially healthy or not healthy my mom or dad were, but I had a sense of it just by their different behaviors and things like that. So that's kind of been, so my relationship is still kind of like contentious because I definitely feel like I experienced knowing that money was often short, or that we had to kind of
Mhm.
figure out how we were going to make ends meet. And so that was always kind of our situation.
Yeah, and my situation was kind of different. I don't want to
Mhm.
incriminate my mom, but my relationship with money was that you had to do unconventional things that may be deemed as illegal in order to get money, whether that would
Mhm.
be scamming, selling drugs, stealing,
Mhm.
you know. So when I was growing up with my mom, because my mom had custody of me up until about 9,
Mhm.
I saw her getting money in ways that as an adult now I would never do.
Yeah.
So I tried to be the opposite of my mom, so much so that I became frivolous with my spending. So when I
Mm.
would make money, I would buy all these things that I didn't get to have, all these things that I wanted. And then I would be the person with the overdraft account, or I would use my money to help other people. So I was one
Mhm.
of those people that, like, I'm gonna use my last to help you because I don't want you to have to resort to X, Y, and Z to get your money. And I
Yeah.
think that in my adulthood, it's been really hard to create a healthy relationship with money because I don't really have
Mhm.
any examples of that. Like my grandmother and my great aunts and stuff on my maternal side, they seemingly have a good relationship with money, but we don't talk about it
Mhm.
openly.
Yeah.
So for me, all I have is the example that my mom showed me. And what my mom showed me was that you get money by any means necessary. Like I even have a tattoo about that on me that says, like, if you're hungry enough, you'll find a way to eat. So like my mentality has always been like, you need to have multiple streams of income. You need to know how to hustle. Like, what other things that you know how to do outside of a 9 to 5? And
Yeah.
because I'm in this academic space now, get my doctoral degree, I'm surrounded by people who did not grow up like that. So when
Mhm.
they're talking about finances and stuff, I'm confused and I'm kind of like, how are y'all able to like live so like careless when it comes to money? When in
Mm.
my head, I'm like,
Mhm.
one wrong move, am I gonna be homeless again? Like one wrong move, am I gonna have dinner for the week?
Right.
And sometimes, like my therapist always says that like that's like a trauma response because I'm
Mhm.
financially in a place where I'm okay. Like I'm
Mhm.
okay now, but mentally I still go back to that place of when you were a
Mhm.
child. And I think you
Mhm.
bring up a really good point of like the contention with money because you become the person in your family that has to help. And
Yeah.
when you have to take on like that parental role financially at a young age, it
Yeah.
kind of like messes with your head a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, like, even today, like, I don't have children, I don't have any
Same.
responsibilities, and yet I still hoard money whenever I get it because I know at some point I'm gonna probably be the person in my family who has to take care of, people. And I have often, even to in my, in the last few years of working post-graduate school, have really felt like my money is not really my money. Like it's mine
Mhm.
because it's in my account, but it's like whenever I don't ever know when there's going to be a situation where I may have to step in and support my family. And there have been situations even over the course of the pandemic where I had to step in. And it's not a problem, but it's just, I think it's always like, I can't, I think I have that feeling of like, oh, girl, don't get too comfortable. Like, we have to, build
Mhm.
this a little bit more. And so, um, and I think that like wherever we fall in the way of spending, like if it's on those extreme ends, I think that is kind of in connection to like that precarity that we feel or felt when it comes to getting money,
Yeah.
or and things like that. I remember in Sister Citizen by Melissa Harris Perry, she talks about
Mhm.
like black, and even Brittany Cooper in Eloquent Rage talks about how like being being academic or being middle class and being overly mobile doesn't necessarily, for black people and black women in particular, doesn't really absolve us of like, it doesn't put us in a position where we've really entered that. It's always just this level of like, ooh, we may be going back because we might be sending money home or doing different things for
Mhm.
our families. And so that means that, it's, our middle class is not necessarily what we might expect in the American, like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and then like we can't really depend on anyone to help us when we're in a bind. And
Yeah.
that's something that I had to learn the hard way because I would, like I said, I was frivolous. Like I would be on that extreme of spending my money, especially when I was in between undergrad and my master's program. Like
Mhm.
I was constantly just spending money, trying to just keep up.
Mhm.
And I realized that I didn't have anybody to go to ask for money, right?
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
people's funds were limited. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize how limited the funds were in my family until I became an adult and I needed that support and they
Yeah.
couldn't provide it. Now, luckily, at that time, my now husband, he was working a job where he had extra finances, so he was able to help support me. But we were
Uh-huh.
not married yet, so he didn't really have an
Mhm.
obligation to do that. He did that because he wanted to, but that's
Yeah.
not everybody's situation, right? So
Yeah.
when you get to that point in your life where you're like, damn, if something happens, who am I going to call? And I tell my siblings this because I'm the second oldest of
Mhm.
10, the eldest
Okay.
daughter.
Oh, ooh,
I tell my
yeah.
siblings this all the time. I'm like, we don't have anybody to call on to if something happens. Like, I'm the
Mhm.
person that y'all will have to call, and I
Yeah.
don't got it.
Mhm.
So you got to be careful with your
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. It's like that safety net. Where is it? Does it exist? Like, it's so true. And I just think about like all the things, even just her, when she talks about like her shoplifting case and like her mother being able to like raise money for her. And, I just remember even in grad school, like I could say that I had the privilege of having a father who worked, and I was on his health insurance for a while in grad school. But like even paying my student fees, my mother started making like handbags and selling them to like
Mhm.
the church ladies, and that was like how she paid my student fees. And, like those different, I never thought of it like hustling, like in the way that, Cecily talks about. And even my dad, like, put like bringing recycling scrap metal or like pop bottles
Mhm.
and things like
Yep.
that. Like those were like these are hustles that my family did, and it was so second nature to me
Yeah.
that but that was how we got a little bit of chunk change to do other things and to make those ends meet. And I just think about that, and I don't, and it was just so seamless. Like it was just like, yep, we got a million cans and we just gonna all be
Yep.
in my ears taking up all the things. But that was how we got by. And I can appreciate it now, but it does make me feel like not really having the conversation about why we were doing it hurt.
Mhm.
It kind of feels like, ooh, that doesn't help me really understand my relationship with money now, I think. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
think it makes us feel like we always have to have multiple streams of income.
Yeah,
And we
for sure.
do, unfortunately, as Black people, we do.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm going to skip a couple questions
Yeah.
because I think this would be a good question to talk about. So this is on page 36 at the top. This is a quote from the book. Black people who are among those who have arguably gotten the shorter end of the capitalist stick have always been judged the most harshly for their participation in it. Can you think of a contemporary example of this statement?
Mm. Ooh. Um,
I can share
um,
mine while you think.
yeah, you can, because I have not thought about this one.
So I put buying nice things. So people
Mm.
assume that because you're poor working class that you shouldn't be allowed to buy nice
Yeah.
things. And
Yep.
I think that if I want to spend my money on a Telfar bag, then I should be
Mm.
able to do that without being judged because
Yeah.
I'm working class or because I'm poor. And I think a
Huh.
lot of times when it comes to Black poor people, we're not allowed to have any luxuries or any forms of
Mhm.
joy or pleasure in material things
Right.
because we are poor. And I
Yeah.
just think that's unfair when you think
Yeah.
about it because other groups get to buy whatever they want to buy and no one's questioning their finances. But the
Mhm.
moment you see someone who may be, let's an example, a single mother
Yeah.
decides that she wants to go on a trip with her girlfriends, people are like, oh,
Mhm.
where you get that money from? It must be tax time or something. And like,
Mhm.
if it is, okay, that's her
Yeah.
business. But I feel
Yeah.
like people always come after Black people in particular, especially poor Black people, when they want to buy themselves something nice. We
Yeah.
deserve to have the same luxuries and nice things as everyone else, no matter what our class status is.
Right. even in the book where she was talking about like when she was on her transition out of working in DC, and then she was going to grad school, and she went to the On the Run concert, like she had to like add the caveat of like as like due to a charity from a friend. And I was like, I feel like she had to do that to kind of like
Mhm.
explain away, like, I know I'm broke and I know y'all gonna
Yeah.
come for me if I tell y'all I'm going to the Beyonce concert, and
Mhm.
I have just told you I quit my job and I don't have a job lined up. Like it felt like, not that, and she doesn't have to, and maybe it was
Yeah.
a choice, but I feel like I could hear people being like, if that little
Mhm.
aside didn't happen, people be like trying to do the math on why she was doing like going to Beyonce. And I think that's a good example too. I think we oftentimes are like, rent, we hear these conversations, are you gonna pay your rent, are you gonna go to the concert or things like that, and it's like Black people deserve joy, and I
Yes.
think going to buying these things, they are not going to single-handedly end capitalism by abstaining from
Mhm.
purchasing whatever thing that brings them joy. And so like, instead, I think we oftentimes, within the capitalist system, we want people to make individual choices, but it's like there's no individual, you can't, but like I always say this, like you cannot budget your way out of poverty. It's just not going to
Yeah.
happen.
It's not.
So you can try as you might, but you need more resources. And so I think that's just um one of the examples I have too.
Yeah, and then the next question I think is really good. It talks about how have participants of your example been judged slash critiqued for their alignment with these practices? And we kind of just talked about that. And I had put
Mhm.
down that people think they're irresponsible. But again, why should they deprive themselves because they are poor? Life is already hard as fuck. So like we should be able to, like you said, we should be able to experience joy. And
Mhm.
you raise a really good point. Like me deciding not to buy that Telfar bag is not going to end capitalism. Like
Mhm.
it's not going to change my class.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like, I mean, I often think about like, and I think I shared this story before, like helping my brother out during the pandemic when because he works like freelance jobs as an athletic trainer. And obviously during COVID, like that was not happening. And so, I needed to help him out with his car. And I remember having a conversation where I had the impulse to be like, so, like, could y'all cut back on like, eating out,
Mhm.
or can y'all like eat, like buy groceries more? Like I was giving all this advice. And I remember just talking to my mom, and I'm like, like I really feel like I should help Dutch out. And she was like, if you have the impulse to help somebody and you have the resources, like
Mhm.
giving them advice is not helpful sometimes. Like
Nope.
sometimes you just have to give them like think about
Yeah.
all these like white families who bail their children out of things when they like that is what
Exactly.
keeps wealth within the family. Like it's
Mhm.
bailing people out and things like that. And so she was just like, if you have it to give, then give it. Don't like
Mhm.
second guess it or feel like, okay, maybe he can make different choices, because the reality is like he's tapped out, right? And
Yeah.
unless we give him enough, a whole set of hours in a day additional to 24 hours, like he don't have it to also work more. So I think just always trying to give people advice to individually control their circumstances is not helpful.
Yeah, and Isabel, I don't know how to make the comments pop up at the bottom, y'all. Bear with me.
I think
Isabel
they're in
says,
the stream, so they will come up in the thing. But let me see if I can put them in the chat real quick. Close.
because I know like Julie, yep, there
Yeah.
we go. That's a very good point. People will shame if you enjoy pleasures. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, let me not enjoy in public because people are going to police my money. People do be counting the money in our pockets. And it's
They
crazy
do.
because
They do.
it's unnecessary. And I think that your
Mhm.
mom, Dr. Donnesha, gave some really good advice about if you feel the impulse to give and you can, go ahead and do it. But the advice isn't helpful. Like, I love my grandpa to death, but my grandpa, whenever I needed to ask him for something, it always came with a lecture in the beginning. And that lecture made me
Mhm.
not want to ask him for things. So it
Yeah.
made me purposely go without things that I needed because I was
Yeah.
afraid to ask him for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It like invites people to be fearful of asking for help. And as a Black woman, it's very hard to already ask for help anyway, because people expect for you to already have it figured out.
Right. And I just think about so many like services and nonprofits that like make you endure like education or like some kind of like process, like like any kind of what is it, proselytize, I can't even say the word, but some kind of like messaging in order to like receive the services. So like it's not just enough to be like, you know what, let's just give it. Like it's always got to be like, so what are you doing to better yourself? And you have to better yourself. And it's all of that preaching for it. And it's like, I think they know the
Yeah,
circumstances that led to this. And I don't think they need the lecture. Let's just,
yeah,
but I think that that's how I feel like a lot of charity has to be given is through this, this messaging around like, um, bootstraps and pulling yourself up. And it's like, yeah, we're past that. So,
yeah. It's it takes a lot of courage to ask for help. And I
mhm,
think that a lot of times people don't realize that when people get to the point where they need to ask for help, they've already reached their wits end. Trust me,
exactly.
they were not trying to ask you,
Hmm.
but they've gotten to a point where they have to. And I
Yeah.
think that it's just a I really don't like nonprofits and charities that like make you make it transactional. So like
Mm,
we'll help you if you do
yeah.
X, Y, and Z. And it's
Right.
like, but what if I still need the help and I haven't done it? So I think about people
Mhm.
who battle with substance abuse, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll let you be in this housing if you don't relapse. But like they don't know if that's going to happen or not. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a person
Yeah.
who just needs the services. So you're going to deny them help because they relapsed? That's crazy to
Mhm.
me.
Or like you can't use drugs while you're within the system. And it's like, okay, like that's a whole nother thing. It's like, that's really hard. Can you imagine like having to decide between a meal and a like an addiction? Like that's not always easy
Mhm.
for people. And so telling them to like just do a hard stop like that, I think most people would say I'm good. And so I just think, yeah, that transactional, like it always has to be like attached to something that you're doing, and it's always connected to some moral like like a value position. And it's like, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the last questions in this section, um, and I was like, oh, we need to definitely answer this because I got a soapbox. How is money used to reaffirm the subordinate position of children within the Black family structure?
Ooh, yeah.
The
Hmm.
first thing I thought about is, do you have McDonald's money? And
Right.
I got so angry because you know damn well I don't have McDonald's money. That's why I'm asking you.
Right.
And my thing is, people talk about that in jest, like we joke about it, but
Yeah.
that type of rhetoric can be dangerous because it starts with, do you have McDonald's money? And it turns into different things where people are questioning your spending habits or questioning why you need something to get you to a point where you don't even want to ask for
Hmm.
anything. And I feel like children should be taught to be able to ask their parents for things and how to ask for help
Right.
or ask for things. You can tell them no and explain why, but
Hmm.
do you have McDonald's money is not an explanation, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a, I think it's my black girl student is gathering me, okay? And she was like, "Black women, y'all are always sarcastic and y'all never really like, and I don't think this is like I think it is a form of sarcasm, but we always shield something really serious or when we're not trying to be vulnerable, with something kind of like a sort of flippant statement or whatever, instead of
Mhm.
just being like, maybe I don't have the McDonald's money either.
Yeah, that's what
Or
I'm telling you.
maybe this is a struggle for me, instead of saying, like, listen, I am between paychecks right now, like, and even if you did have it, but being like, you know I think holding that over someone's head, as a way to like reinforce this power dynamic with our children, it's like it really buys into this concept like we're owning our children, and I think we
Mhm.
have to be real careful about that. And obviously I'm not a parent, so I don't know what goes on between like what that impulse to reinforce that power dynamic feels like for parents. But I just feel like moving throughout the world feeling like you're owned by somebody, that's I
Yeah,
think that's troubling. And so I think you know having those frank conversations, I think that's one of the things that Cecily is talking about in the book, is like, it had her mother had been real with her, or had parents been real with their children about where they were, not to be like growing up too fast, because that's a whole level of trauma that kids don't
mhm,
need, but just a realization that I can communicate to them instead of like blowing them off. I think is like something that we need more of, that we
yeah,
don't do.
I agree, and I think that having those conversations with your child when they're young will assist them
Mhm.
with understanding in their relationship with money. Because when you think about being told no in a way that's flippant all the time, you can get to a point where you get older and you're frivolous. You never
Mhm.
tell yourself no. You don't even think about giving yourself any type of limits because you were always limited as a child. And I
Yeah.
know sometimes people will be like, y'all reaching, like it's not that serious, but it really is that
Mhm.
serious when you think about it, because we know
Yep.
people who grew up in those type of environments who are like that now. We know
Yeah.
people who blow all of their money. Think about celebrities.
Yeah.
Celebrities come from situations where they were impoverished or they had
Mhm.
limitations, and then they get all this money and they don't know what to do with themselves, and then all their money is gone.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think you're really onto something when you talk about having those conversations, and of course making them kid friendly, obviously, but like just being honest, like we can't go to McDonald's every time we go out, but
Mhm.
twice a month we can go when we go to X, Y, and Z place, or we can make our own McDonald's at home. Like think of different activities. And I guess for me as a teacher, I used to teach preschool. Now I teach college, but when I taught preschool, we always had to come up with creative ways because we couldn't tell the students no or be
Yeah.
flippant. We had to think of other solutions, right?
Yeah.
And it really worked with the kids because it allowed the kids to think critically about things and be able to come up with solutions themselves for their own
Yeah.
problems.
Yes.
So I think that that's
Absolutely.
something that, and I don't have any kids. I'm a fur mom, but like I said, I'm the second oldest of 10. I'm three people
Mhm.
godmama, and I got nieces and nephews, and I've been raising
Right.
my siblings. Okay, so I feel like even though
Yes.
we may not have children, we still understand that
Yes.
children are people and need to be
Right.
treated as such.
I feel like I call it like my auntie politics.
Mhm.
Like, you
I love
know,
that.
and so I love what you just said about like how um I can't remember what you just said. I lost my train of thought, but we can move
About the
on.
I was talking about solutions and them learning how to create solutions out of their problems.
Yeah, it was something like right before that too, and I can't remember what you said.
I can't remember what I said either. I told you I was gonna be on a soapbox because I
Yeah,
just that do you have McDonald's money? That used to
yeah,
burn me up. I
rough.
used to be like,
Yeah.
and I was a very like mouthy child. So
Uh-huh.
I used to be like, no, I don't have McDonald's money. Like,
Right.
why would you even
Right.
ask me some rhetorical question like that? You know I ain't got no money, girl. That's why I'm asking
Right.
you.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, the question when you talk about celebrities and like
Mhm.
that restrict, but like even when we frame like basic things, like I mean, I still struggle with this. Like going out to eat is a treat, and sometimes it's like, but it's also a necessity because I have to
Yeah.
eat, and like I don't have
Mhm.
time. So it's just like I have my friends are always like trying to encourage me, like, "Oh, girl, go get that Chipotle," like and because
Mhm.
I think that kind of restrictive, like like childhood makes everything feel like it is a treat when it's actually just nourishment for you,
Yeah.
as well. And it may not be for everyone's best example of it, but it is a form of getting your calories in that you need to survive.
I
And so
love
if
that.
everything is kind of like treated that way, then you don't know, you either are too restrictive or you have moments where you just like off the wall, and it's like there's no balance there.
Yeah.
And I think that
I
that's
I
what.
love that. I'm gonna take that and think about that when I want to get things. Cause like
Mhm.
I bought a ring light and a new camera because last week when I did this with Julesy, it was like
Yeah.
really blurry and stuff. And I
Uh-huh.
felt bad for doing that. I was like, well, you
Mhm,
spending that money
mhm.
on a camera and a ring light, you could just use what you have. But what I
Yeah,
have was not doing what it needed to do.
yeah.
And I felt bad because I was like, this is a frivolous thing that I'm doing, but no,
Mhm.
it's a part of the job that I have to do. So I really
Right.
like that mode of thinking that you just
Yep.
talked about, and I'm definitely going to make sure I keep that in the back of my mind when there
Yeah.
are things that can suffice as enjoyment and also,
Yeah.
as you say, like nourishment.
Mhm. Absolutely. Listen, you read me because I probably should invest in a light because these the natural light is definitely going down. So, you know.
Yeah, I have like a flag in front of my window, not an
Uh-huh.
American flag, not an American flag,
Uh-huh.
but I have a
Oh,
flag in front
didn't even go there.
in
But
front of my window, so like it changes the color in the room when the sun goes
oh,
down.
okay.
So
Yeah.
I need the light. If you watch the video from last week, I look very grainy. I look like I am on an
Yeah, I
no shade
watched it.
to Android.
I didn't even notice it because
See,
I'm
that's the
used
best
to.
thing I know.
Listen, I'm used to always having you look at some of our old videos and it's me. I think there was a video where I was just like moving in slow motion because my internet connection was just terrible. And I always think about trying to buy Ethernet cord, but I'm like, can you even hook Ethernet cords up to these computers these days? Like, what kind of adapter do you need to do that? Because
Uh-huh.
my streaming is awful. So, we'll see what the replay looks like for this conversation. I might just be coming in and out every other sentence.
So, did you have any questions in particular that you wanted to look at in part 5, chapter 5?
Chapter 5. I no, we can just go because I was struggling today and could not download quickly enough, and so I
Okay.
am here
So
answering questions.
I
So we
got
can
you.
go.
I got you. So the first question are, what are your earliest experience? Okay, so I'm going to read this little blurb first so you
Yeah.
all kind of. So in chapter 4 is the plan chapter 5 is the plan B
Mhm.
chapter. This says the hypersexualization of Black women and girls is a pervasive cultural occurrence that has seeped into the fabric of trap culture. Sesali gives close insight into her personal experience with sexual exploration and curiosity. As a young Black girl, starting her menstrual cycle was yet another step in the quest towards sexual understanding and fulfillment. She was enamored by the energy of sex and sexuality. So the first question is, what are your earliest experiences with hypersexualization?
Hmm. I did think about this question. And there was a few examples. One, I remember a lot of wow, God. I mean, men just always trying to hit on me. I remember being like, ooh, was I 11 or 14? Either way, it was still too young. This old man in Kmart, he had to be about 70. And he was like, hey, I was going to the bathroom. He was just hanging out by the bathroom, asking me if I had a boyfriend. And of course, at that age, I'm like, I'm just looking at him like, well, why are you asking me that? And my mom comes in and she goes off on this man. She's like, she is 11 or however old I was. She's 11 years old. And I had no idea that he was trying to pick me up. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that this old man sees in me, right? I'm fully like, and I'm even trying to rash like fully covered. Like that don't even matter. I could be butt
Yeah,
naked. It doesn't matter. Like,
yeah.
but I think it was just like, what was it in me, right? And we start to kind of question that could cause somebody at that age to see
Mm-hmm.
as somebody who could potentially be his little girlfriend or whatever. And so I just
Exactly.
all those instances, or just like being in public schools in Flint, walking down the hall, getting your ass grabbed, like that was just
Mm-hmm.
the day-to-day thing. And those were all moments that I can recognize as an adult were ways that I was hypersexualized. um and so yeah.
Yeah, for me, on my maternal, it's so weird. On my maternal paternal side, so my grandfather's side, my mom's
Mhm.
dad.
Okay.
My great aunts used to always talk about my hips and my thighs when I was a
Mm,
young age, and they used to pinch at them and stuff. And from that
mm,
moment on, it made me feel like my body wasn't my own. And then I was molested by one of their husbands at 9, and that kind of reinforced this idea to me, at least, that my body was not my own. And I couldn't
mhm.
figure out, just like you said, like, what was it about my 9-year-old body that would be
Right.
attractive to a 70-year-old man,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
why are you, and then also, like, why would you pinch at a young girl's body to
Mhm.
point out their body parts in that
Yep.
way? Shanice Hines, I don't know if you could pull her comment up,
Mhm.
but not being able to wear normal clothes in your own home, that was also an
Oh my
issue.
goodness. Yes.
That was
Yep.
also an issue. So the family member
Don't
that I
be
lived with, the uncle that had sexually abused me, when I woke up in the morning, I had to be fully dressed before I
Yep.
came downstairs. And
Yep.
I was like, now that I'm an adult, I'm like, me being fully dressed didn't even keep me from him doing what he did to me. So
No.
what was the reason?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who are we protecting here?
Yep. But I think about that even today. Like I do not walk around my house without a bra. And I know that I have not experienced that in my family, but it's just like it's always been so ingrained to me. Like you don't walk around men,
Mm-hmm.
that are related or not. You don't walk around them with, half dressed or with your house coat without a house coat or something to cover yourself. And how restrictive is that? Like you're supposed to be in
Yeah.
your own home or at least, feel at home. And so much of what we tell Black girls to do to self-regulate is a way of, um, isolating them and keeping them from, feeling access to their own spaces. And
Yeah,
it's just,
I agree. And that's a good segue into the question. It's on page 41. So I'm going to read
mm-hmm,
this blurb. With that being said, anyone who called me fast when I was younger was on the money. I've been fascinated with sexuality, or at least super curious about it, ever since I was young. Sesali seems to reclaim the fast-tailed girl trope here, embracing her early curiosity with sex and sexuality. How can this reclamation be used to empower Black girls?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes.
It really took the pain for me
Let
to
me
finally
put
walk
that.
around my. I agree. What's crazy is that
Yeah.
I didn't start feeling comfortable walking around like this in my house until after I got married. Like my husband and I
Mm.
were dating the whole time. We were living together, all types of things, but I still was like uncomfortable. I would still like put on my bra and put on my clothes and stuff. And then one day I was like, I pay bills in here.
Right.
I was like, what? And I was like, I don't feel comfortable having to be fully dressed all the time. Now I do,
Mhm.
when I do get up during the day, I do put on clothes to make myself feel like I'm going somewhere because I'll teach
Yeah.
at home. But
Okay.
outside of that, like I will get out of
Yeah.
pajamas and put on lounging outfits. And I'm not gonna put
Yeah.
on a bra unless I have to.
Yeah. Listen,
Um,
I am
so
straight up. I'm trying to embrace my summertime braless, but definitely in the wintertime when I know I got a bunch of layers on, I'm like, bra wear. Like, we're just
yeah,
not
oh
doing
yeah, I love the layers with no bra. It's
it.
wonderful.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that the reclamation can be used to teach them about bodily autonomy, right? So teaching them that they
Mm-hmm.
have sovereignty over their body. And I
Yes.
think that as Black girls in particular, our bodies are adultified so young that we,
Mm-hmm.
like I said in the last question, we feel like our bodies are not our own. They're for
Mm-hmm.
other people's pleasures and enjoyment and not for our own pleasures and enjoyment. And it doesn't even have to be sexual in a sense, but like we don't look at our bodies as pleasure seeking things for ourselves. It's
Yeah.
always what can we do for someone else because that's what we've been taught.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just even like talking to girls about like masturbation and self pleasure is so critical because then it's like what it's supposed to feel like rather than just hoping to God that somebody tells you. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's just like so much pleasure is like it's like narrated to us, right? And like
Yeah.
you're supposed to feel good and you're like, oh, I guess it does, and you're like, but until you enable Black girls to or giving them the tools, I guess, to do their own exploration about what pleasure is for them. And not necessarily that it has to be tied to like masturbation or anything like that, but just, whatever touch, whatever it is, like,
Mhm.
um, but just and knowing like, does this feel good to me? And being able to say, can you ask that question of yourself?
Yeah.
I think it's really important to empowering and asking and allowing girls to reclaim their sexuality, but most importantly their bodies.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that like respectability is a big key player in how we teach young girls about sex and sexuality.
Mhm.
We put this idea of purity onto them, this concept
Yeah.
of purity, and it can be very confusing for a young girl. I can remember when we were in fourth and fifth grade and we learned about our periods, and it was literally just a 1 day 30-minute class where we talked about periods for a little bit, and that was it. That was my sexual education.
Yep.
Everything else I learned from watching late night Cinemax and HBO and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was very confused about
Yeah.
sexual sex and what sex looks like for me. And
Mhm.
this makes me think of, I don't know if you keep up with pop culture, but this week, DJ Envy from the Breakfast Club, him and his wife did an interview. And she literally
Uh-huh.
said during the interview that she's never had an orgasm with her husband. And they've been married, they've been together forever. And she
They
said it
have like
in front of them.
7 children. They have like, well, they just had a baby.
Yes. So she was like, yeah, I never really had an orgasm. And they just sat there and act like that was
What?
normal. And he was
I
cheating
don't
on
know
her
why I
too.
feel
I was like,
sorry.
not only is he cheating, he also not giving you an orgasm. Like, why are we with this man?
That must be really frustrating. Like, I can't even imagine not having like with. Did she say with him, or has she ever had an
It
orgasm?
was with him. But they've been
Ooh,
together
that's
so long. I don't know. He might have been her first.
sis.
But
I'm just praying for a vibrator somewhere in this
I just
marriage.
thought that was so strange. And I thought it was even stranger that she was comfortable enough to say that with him sitting right there and they just
Yeah.
like it was
Because then
normal.
I was, and then that he's not ashamed that he like she's not getting any pleasure from you, like, and y'all just okay. We just gonna be okay with that.
Like, and clearly we know you're having orgasms because y'all have like 3,000 children.
Yeah.
So
Oh, Gia, what is her name? Gia.
yeah, I think her name is Gia. I just
Mm.
yeah, when I saw that everyone was talking about it on Twitter, I was like, she's not having orgasms? And what? Huh? And I said him?
Wow.
Um, Britt Wiggins Bean just put a really good comment. There is a challenge of dealing with those same pressures and expectations from our peers who are bound by the standards of respectability when we should be free with each other. Exactly. I remember being in middle school and my best friends and I would talk about like sex and boys and stuff like
Mhm.
that and masturbation, but we knew that we couldn't talk about that around certain people
Yeah.
because of respectability.
Yeah.
And it made it hard for me to be like transparent with some of my friends because I knew that they would be judgmental or I knew that they would tell their mama my business.
Yeah. Yep.
So I definitely feel you on that, Britt.
Yeah. And how much of, because how much safety is at risk. Like, if you, we know we're gonna do it, right? Kids are gonna have sex, like, or be curious, and so like, I think this idea that we can keep them from it,
Mm-hmm.
from period, right? Like, I think that's not useful. I think like, because then you are like in situations where and not to say that having an STI is the worst thing in the world, because we're not doing that, but I think it's just like, how can you protect your body in ways that don't mean that you have to abstain from like pleasure
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever. And so not having the information, right? Like, she talks about like having access to all of these different resources. And so she knew how to make choices on the outcomes that she didn't want and the outcomes that she did want. And
Mm-hmm.
like, when we restrict people and kids from having those open conversations, then it just becomes like they don't know how to make other choices based on whatever outcomes they have. So like this weekend we were watching Blackish. We started from the beginning, and it was the episode where Junior was talking about like all of his like urges, and he was like going into detail and things like that. And Dre was just so visibly uncomfortable, and he was just like, by the end of the episode, he was just like, let's just go to mom with all the everyday things about your sexuality, but like the big stuff you can come to me. And I just felt like Dre's discomfort with hearing about like, oh, I had this sexual fantasy about a teacher or whatever. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, what could have been productive about it if he did engage his son and not just like cringed at the thought
Yeah.
of of him, having a sexual fantasy? What if he actually would have talked it through and be like, okay, so what is that about? And like, where do you think that comes from? Or, how are you going to act on that? Like, I think that would have been a good space, as opposed to putting on the woman to do the emotional labor
Yeah.
of having to help this boy navigate his sexuality. So
Yeah. And it's like you read the questions because your responses lead into the question that I'm about to
oh,
ask. Like you can read my mind. So on page 43, it says much of Cecily's formal information about sex and reproductive health came from her time accompanying her mom at work while she manned the front desk at an OBGYN's clinic. She described vivid scenes of domestic violence, tampon removal, pregnancy verification appointments, and in a sense, communal congregation. Who is responsible for your personal sexual education? Who or what do you credit with giving you the most honest insight into sex and sexual education?
listen, we gonna be honest. I'm a whole 32, and I feel like I still don't
I'm
have.
31, so I know my answer's about to be stupid.
I feel like you know porn. No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah.
like seriously,
No.
and that's so sad because it's like having a understanding of like porn and TV and all the ways that sex is supposed to look, right? Like even just the visual of sex, right, is not in practice looks nothing like what we see.
Nope.
And yet, and it isn't even set up to be pleasurable. And yet that is the main source of information. Now, yes, I did have health classes in school, but again, they were very much like teaching about reproductive health via periods and don't have sex, because you will get chlamydia and die, to quote Mean Girls. But like,
Yeah.
like I think I think if I would say a lot of it was through popular culture, through pornography and things like that. And that's just like, I'm still
Yeah.
suffering because of it.
Yeah.
Thank God I'm feminists and Black feminists who have talked about vibrators and things like that. But that was very late in life, like later in my history. So
Same. For me, it was Cinemax, HBO Late at Night, and BET Uncut. Also,
yes,
urban novels like Be More Careful and Coldest Winter Ever.
yes,
That's how I learned about sex. It's through those
all the
novels and
things.
experimenting with boys and stuff when I was
Mhm.
younger, like just experimenting with people on what I saw on TV and what it was supposed to feel like.
Yep.
I didn't have access to the internet. The internet was not like that type of thing back when me
Mhm.
and Donnesha were young. So we used to see our stuff on Channel 2 late at
Yes.
night. Real Sex was one of the shows, and the
Yes.
Bunny Ranch, I think that's what it's called. The Bunny Ranch. Those were the type of shows that I was
Yep.
watching.
Yes.
And there were no adults around because my mom worked overnight. So I was looking at it like that. I also learned about sex work at a very young age. So I have a cousin
Mm.
that's a trans woman, and they used to always say, like, oh, Pie's gonna come after work. She's, working late here and there. And as I got
Mhm.
older, I was like, I wonder what she's doing. And then I figured out, I was like, oh, she's a lady of the night. So
Mhm.
I learned about sex work at a very young age as well. But I would
Yeah.
definitely say the urban novels were my go-to.
You reminded me of so much because like Around the Way Girls and Zane books, those were like the scripts, right? And it was, and even fan fiction, Lord, B2K
Mhm.
fan fiction, my God, sexual
Uh,
script, okay.
Chloe's comment is
Oh,
hilarious.
let me put it on.
My dad just told me to read a chapter in this memoir about teenagers running trains on girls. What? It's so extreme. It's either they don't talk to you about it, or if they do talk to you about it, it's extreme. There's
They
no
want to
there's no gray area.
they want to scare the shit out of you. So it's just like, read this. It's like, really? But I do want to go back up to this comment, because it made me think about, there's a different level of stigma for queer folks. And I think about like how sex education is just not even
Nope.
like tailored toward queer, trans like kids. And so, we think about, I was having a conversation with my student, and they were talking about some boundaries that they feel like queer folks lack in terms of like dating and relationships. And I was like, well, let's talk about it. You have a right to have boundaries, and you have a right to be to not accept someone's advances. But I was like, you also have to remember too that a lot of queer people don't always have somebody giving them any kind of scripts about dating, about sexuality, about actual sexual practice. And so like, and I don't think we do, straight people either. I think it's just that um there's so much out there about straightness,
Yep.
that it just isn't for. So like, you do get, this is how you ask a girl out. Now, is it the right way? Is it founded in any kind of consensual like commentary?
Mhm.
Maybe not, but at the very least it assumes that, oh, this is how you would go about it, right? Whereas like, I don't think, a lot of queer folks have, sometimes depending on where you are, you don't always have the access to a older adult or elder to be able to guide you through and school you on these things. So I just think that, when we talk about sex ed, it's just like, it's horrifying
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
everybody, but particularly our queer and trans youth. So,
I agree. And I work with an organization, Abortion Fund. I used to work there, but now I just volunteer because, as you
mhm,
know, that PhD process will take you out the game if you're trying to work full time. And I don't know who I thought I was, but anyway,
yeah,
um, we're trying to figure out ways to have that effective sexual education courses
mhm,
for all people, because that's
mhm,
important for queer people to be
yeah,
able to have information on sexual education.
yeah,
So I talked a little bit about sex work, but in chapter 6, which is our
mhm,
last chapter, on page 46, it says, "For us to be so disgusted by and ashamed of women who get paid under the large umbrella of sex work, we damn sure can't look away." What is your
mm,
understanding of sex work and the various careers that fall under the umbrella?
yeah. I think over the course of the my time in grad school, I've certainly I now, I don't know if I was using prostitution back in 2012 when I started grad school, but I certainly knew very quickly that that was not okay. We were definitely using sex work, and I think that even Cecily gives us different examples, like cam girls and
Mhm,
like, OnlyFans and escorts, and those were things that we talked about. So or that I was like exposed to or understood, like some of the people that I went to grad school were going out or being escorts, and I was like, oh, okay, and they were calling it sex work, and I was like, oh, all right, that's okay. And then even having a conversation about strippers being
yeah,
sex workers, like I think that was something that was new to me, because you would think like prostitute person who has sex in a hotel room, that is all that sex work
yep,
is. But when we start to really expand and think about all of the ways. And I can really appreciate even how she talks a little bit about like transactional sex versus like professional sex work, or something she
mhm.
said like professional. Um, and so yeah, I certainly have like expanded my definition over the years as I've learned more through reading and through different communities that I was around.
Yeah. I definitely agree that, like, I told you how I was introduced to sex work at a young age, but I didn't know it was called that.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned the language of what sex work was after undergrad. I would say that's
Mm-hmm.
when I kind of really understood it. So, like, my definition of sex work that I tell my students, because I teach in the gender, sexuality, and women's studies department, is that sex work is any form of work that alludes to or involves the acts of sex or sexual desires. So that
Mm.
can be being a go-go dancer, right? Depending on what type of club you're working at, all the
Yep.
way to being an escort. So I think
Yeah.
um there are so many different types of options when it comes to sex work. And I feel like now that we have social media, it's much easier to learn about these different types of things and
Mm-hmm.
to know what to call them so that we're
Yeah.
not being, ignorant to what they
Right.
really are and what they
Yeah.
should be called.
Yeah.
So, media moment. What popular television shows and films depict occurrences of sex work?
What popular television film to pick? I mean, Pose. I love Pose. I think it's so good, and um, I really wish that someone would give me their password, so I could watch P Valley because I heard that was
Yes,
really
P Valley
good.
is so
Uh,
good.
yeah,
It's so good.
I gotta get the
I,
plug for that.
I thought Players Club, which is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
Um, Also, Girl Six. I think that's the name of the movie. The
Mm-hmm.
Spike Lee Call Girl movie. Those were the
Yes.
things that came to mind for me. And there's been plenty of instances of like sex work in television shows and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
especially from the 90s, like black shows and stuff. And
Yeah.
I would have reason to believe that Regine from Living Single was an escort sometimes, right? Because
Ooh.
of the type of men that she went after. And she wasn't always
Mhm.
necessarily looking for a husband. She was looking for a sponsor. And that's what I loved about her. She was
Mm.
about her coin.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I would even consider Regine a sex worker,
Mm.
in my opinion. I hope you get
Yeah.
someone's password so you can watch P Valley before the new season starts in June.
Right. I just need to break down and get it and just, do a trial for a month because I can binge it. But
That's what I do. I'll do a trial, I'll watch P Valley, and then
yeah,
I make sure I cancel it before. Yep.
right. Yep. I think I'm
Do it
just
all
gonna
the
break
time.
down because people have been telling me it's so good. And so
Yep. It really is good. So let's see.
let me make a quick comment about Players Club because I did not realize that Diamond was in school. Like
Yeah.
the whole idea, like I have to go watch it back because I was very young when I watched it. But when she was talking about, how girls are paying their way through school, and I was like, and then she mentioned the Players Club, and I was like, was that really how it was? So I'm gonna have to go
Yeah,
back.
Players Club is one of
Mhm.
my favorite movies. I don't know. So there's another movie that I love called Woo with Jada Pinkett Smith in
Yes.
it.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
don't know if Celestial, which was the trans woman that did tarot readings, I wasn't sure if they
Hmm.
were a sex worker, but they did work at a club. So I would
Hmm.
consider them a sex worker as well.
Okay.
So okay. Okay, here we go. So 47 at the bottom. In December
Hmm.
2021, 23-year-old Lauren Smith Fields mysteriously died while on an at-home date with an older white man. While the immediate timeline following her death was met with silence, social media soon began to speculate about the details of the date. The murky details led many users to believe that the young woman pursued her 37-year-old date via Bumble in hopes of financial gain, likely in exchange for sex. As supporters begin to rally for justice, many have held tight to their staunch belief and insistence that Smithfields was not an escort or gold digger. This was a Black woman that deserved to be successful and grow old with her family, as one Facebook user wrote. How does this statement speak to the societal refusal to respect sex work?
Mm. Well, I think it's those respectability politics that start to seep in. So the idea that we can validate her as a a perfect victim, right? If we can frame her in that way, somehow then that justifies us having outrage when it's like we should have outrage because she was a human being in this
Yeah.
world. and lived, like, period. No, she didn't have to do anything exceptional to be able to be seen as a
Yeah.
victim. And so I think sometimes when we have these good intentions, because we really do want people to see this person as worthy, and I get it, right? We know that Black women going missing or dying under suspicious circumstances doesn't get the recognition that it should. And yet, us doing that kind of work to try to create the perfect victim, it plays into white supremacy anyway. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
help. So
Yeah, I agree. And for the question that was after that, I did put the respectability has us by our edges. Like, it
mhm,
puts sex workers in this box that they're unsuccessful, stupid, not smart, and undeserving of just undeserving of respect in general. So, like, if
mhm,
she was a sex worker, how would that make her death any less important than her not being one? And
right.
I feel like that only happens to Black women, right?
Mhm,
I feel like Black women, and this is including trans women and non-binary femmes as well. When I use Black women, I'm using that as a spacious word.
yeah.
But when Black women are murdered and killed, we're always trying to find a reason to make them valuable or worthy
Mhm,
as to why they
mhm,
should be alive, instead of just being alive because they're human, like you said. Like, we should have value because we exist. We
yeah.
shouldn't have to do any particular profession or have any particular degrees or talk a certain way or dress a certain way or have a smile that lights up the room. We shouldn't have to have all of those things in order to be able, to be
Mhm,
seen as valuable. And I think that
mhm,
that's something that was very fucked up when it came to Lauren
yeah,
Smith Fields, because it was like, who gives a shit if she was a sex worker or not? She was
right.
killed, and this white man got away with it.
Yeah.
He got away with it. Like, he not in
Mhm,
jail for what I know.
yeah.
So we have another life lost at the hands of a white man, and nothing happened.
Mhm,
But no one
yeah.
cares about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are our questions for this week. And then next week, we'll be finishing up the syllabus. Hopefully y'all are able to
Yeah.
download it. I know there were some issues earlier with the download, so hopefully it's working
Yeah.
now.
Yes, yes. And thank you all for engaging tonight. I hope you all had a good time and are enjoying the book. And I don't know who's gonna be back for next week's discussion. Maybe I'll
I'll
say
be back, but I don't know who I'll be with.
I'll
Hopefully.
put it in the chat and I'll just see if Julie wants to do it or if if I can do it. So but
Sweet.
thank you all, and it was good talking to you. And we're gonna end the stream right now.
All right, bye y'all.
Bye.